The reservation was for two. The name on the file was Harlow. Table 12, corner window, the good one, the one that looked out over the water. Simone had worked that section for 3 years. She knew which tables mattered and which ones people just thought mattered. Table 12 actually mattered. You didn't put a business lunch there, you didn't put a birthday there either, not unless it was the kind of birthday with a ring at the end of it. She pulled the booking up on the screen. Harlow Vincent. 7:30 p.m., 2 guests. Special occasion noted, anniversary. She set the tablet down on the host stand and went back to folding napkins. Simone had been working at Maison Dorval since she was 24. She was 31 now, and had worked her way from coat check to floor manager, which in this restaurant meant she ran everything that happened between the front door and the kitchen pass. She knew the regulars by name and the wine list by memory. She knew when to smile and when to disappear. She was good at her job in the way that people who love something they chose for themselves are always good at it. Vincent had never fully understood that. He understood what she earned, what her hours looked like, why she smelled like the kitchen when she came home at midnight. He did not understand why any of that was worth it when he could simply provide. He had said that once, very casually, over breakfast, that she didn't need to work like that. As though work was something you did because you had to. As though she was waiting to be rescued from something she had built herself. She had smiled and poured more coffee and let the conversation go. That was 3 years ago, and nothing had changed, and now his name was in her reservation book. The couple arrived at 7:42. Simone saw them from across the room. She always saw the door, and for a moment her brain performed a very calm, very precise act of not understanding. That was Vincent. That was obviously Vincent. She knew the way he walked, the specific tilt of his shoulders when he was performing ease, he didn't quite feel. He was wearing the gray blazer she had picked out with him at Holt Renfrew 18 months ago. The woman beside him was not her. Simone did not move. She watched Claude, one of her floor staff, approach them with menus. She watched Vincent put his hand on the woman's lower back to guide her through the room. An unconscious gesture, or maybe very conscious, the kind of thing you do when you've done it enough times that it's become automatic. Her chest did something she didn't have a name for. Not breaking. Closer to a hinge, suddenly discovered, suddenly stressed. She picked up the reservation tablet. She walked to the host stand. She looked at the name again. Harlow, Vincent, anniversary. She thought about the evening she had planned for her own birthday 2 months ago. How he had canceled an hour before because of a client call. How she had eaten the leftovers of what she'd cooked herself standing over the kitchen counter. She set the tablet down. She walked across the floor. Good evening. Evac. Her voice came out exactly as it always did. Warm, unhurried, precise. Welcome to Maison Dorval. Vincent looked up. The moment his eyes found her, something moved across his face. Not guilt. Not yet, but its precursor. The place before guilt where the mind scrambles to calculate. She watched it happen in about half a second, and then watched him arrange his expression into something neutral. Simone, he said. Vincent. She looked at the woman across the table. Beautiful mid-30s looking between them with a question starting to form on her face. And you must be our other guest this evening. I'm Simone, the floor manager. I'll make sure you're looked after tonight. The woman smiled, a little uncertain. Thank you. It's a lovely space. It is, Simone said. We're very glad you're here. She placed the menus herself. She made sure they had water. She told them about the seasonal tasting menu and the sommelier's recommendation for the evening, and she did all of it with exactly the same calm she brought to every table in the room, which was considerable. Vincent watched her the entire time with an expression she had never seen on him before. She did not look at him long enough to study it. Enjoy your evening, she said, and walked back to the floor. The kitchen was warm and bright and smelled like brown butter and thyme, and for the 20 minutes after that Simone was everywhere at once in the way she always was on a full house night. She checked in with the pass. She managed a complaint at table 6 about a corkage fee, which she resolved in 40 seconds. She sent a birthday dessert to table 9, with a candle shaped like a maple leaf, because the family had mentioned it was a Canadian tradition in their family, and she always remembered those things. She did not go back to table 12. Claude handled it. Claude was excellent. She had trained him herself, At 8:15, she slipped into the narrow corridor beside the wine cellar and stood there for 90 seconds, with her back against the cool plaster wall, not thinking, just breathing. The sound of the restaurant came through the wall, muffled and constant, like the sound of a river heard from inside a house. She had known, she realized. She hadn't known the details, but she had known the shape of something wrong for a long time. The way you know a door doesn't hang right before you figure out it's the hinges that have shifted. She had kept not looking at it directly. She breathed in, she breathed out. She went back to work. At 9:05, Vincent excused himself from the table. Simone saw it happen because she saw everything that happened on this floor, which was a professional habit and also, tonight, an inconvenience. He found her by the sommelier station. Simone. His voice was low and careful. I'm working, Vincent. I know. I didn't know you'd be here tonight. I didn't. This isn't. He stopped. Started again. I need you to know this isn't what it looks like. She looked at him then, really looked, and she thought about how strange it was that people said that. This isn't what it looks like. As though the problem were her eyes. As though the issue were some failure of perception on her part. I have a table waiting on a burgundy recommendation, she said. Please go back to your guest. Simone, I'm not going to do this here. Still calm, still the same voice. I am not going to do this in my restaurant on a Saturday night. If you want to have a conversation, we can have it when I get home. If you don't want to wait that long, you can leave. She picked up 2 glasses and walked to table 3. She didn't watch him leave. She heard the shift in the room that a departure always causes. A very small atmospheric change, 2 fewer people, a slight opening in the ambient sound. And she knew he was gone without having to look. He had not stayed to finish dinner. That told her something. She wasn't sure yet what to do with it. She got home at 12:48. The apartment was dark and quiet in the way that a space feels specifically quiet when a person has recently been in it and left. A glass on the counter, a coat thrown over the chair and then reconsidered, picked up, hung properly. Signs of someone preparing to be absent. There was a note on the kitchen island. I should have talked to you sooner. I'm sorry for how you found out. I'm staying at Martin's. I think we both know this has been over for a long time. I'll call when you're ready. She read it twice. She set it down. She stood in the kitchen for a moment, looking at the note and the glass and the coat hook where he had hung his jacket, with the same carefulness he applied to everything he did, except, apparently, her marriage. Then she put the kettle on, because she wanted tea, and she sat down at the island with her hands around a warm mug, and she thought about what she actually felt underneath the numbness that had been carrying her through the last 4 hours. She felt tired. She felt, strangely, like something that had been pressing against her chest for a very long time had eased slightly. She did not feel surprised. The weeks that followed were quiet in the way that things are quiet after a storm. Not peaceful exactly, but still. Simone had never been a person who processed things dramatically. She was not the kind of woman who called 12 friends and told the story until it lost its shape. She was the kind of woman who went to work and paid her bills and let herself feel what she felt in small, honest increments. Vincent called on a Tuesday. She let him talk. He was sorry, he said. He had not handled it well, he said. Kayla? That was her name, the woman at the table. Kayla? It had started 8 months ago and he had told himself a dozen different stories about why it was happening and none of them reflected well on him in retrospect. She appreciated that, he admitted that. It was more than she had expected. She told him she wanted the apartment. He agreed without argument. She suspected he had been expecting a different kind of conversation and was slightly off balance at not receiving it. She asked him to get the rest of his things before the end of the month. He said he would. That was essentially it. She had imagined that moment, the eventual conversation, probably 100 times. She had imagined being angrier. She had imagined breaking. It turned out she had spent so much of herself quietly grieving the marriage, while she was still in it, that there was not much left to perform when it actually ended. She signed the separation papers in early November. She went back to work the next morning. The thing that nobody tells you about a life that continues after a marriage ends is that it does, in fact, continue. Obviously. But obviously is different from actually. Simone's restaurant had its best winter in years. The Globe and Mail ran a short feature on Maison Dorval in February, and mentioned her by name. The floor manager, whose instincts for hospitality made the room feel, the writer said, like a dinner party rather than a service transaction. She sent a copy to her mother, who cried, which was her mother's way of expressing pride. In March, the owner called her into his office. His name was Paul Garneau, and he was 73 years old, and he had been running Maison Dorval for 31 years, which was exactly as long as Simone had been alive. He had been talking, he said, about the future of the restaurant. His daughter was in Vancouver and not interested in taking it over. His son ran a software company in Kitchener. He had been thinking, very carefully, about who understood this place the way it needed to be understood. Simone listened. He offered her a partnership, not a small one, a real one, a stake, a title, a future. She asked for the weekend to think about it, because she was not the kind of person who decided things in rooms. She spent Saturday walking by the lake, watching the ice pull back from the shore in the early thaw. She thought about the year she had just had. She thought about what it meant to build something that was entirely yours. She thought about sitting at that kitchen island with tea, and the particular feeling of a weight lifting. She called Paul on Sunday afternoon and said yes. She heard about Vincent through a mutual friend in April. He and Kayla had broken up sometime in February. No drama, apparently. They had simply discovered that the thing they'd had while it was a secret was different from the thing they had once. It was the only thing. Simone received this information and felt almost nothing, which surprised her a little, and then didn't. She did hear, through the same friend, that Vincent had driven past Maison Dorval twice on a Saturday night in March and not gone in. She did not know what to do with that information either, except to notice it and set it aside. There was a night in May, late in the season, when the light finally started staying until 8 or 9. When Simone was closing up and the last server had left and it was just her doing the final walk. Lights, locks, the small rituals of closing a place that was becoming, by degrees, partly hers. She turned off the lamp above table 12. She stood there for a second in the near dark, the room holding the smell of the evening. Warm bread and candle wax and the ghost of something red and good from table 3's wine. And she thought about that night in October, when she had looked up and seen Vincent and felt something hinge and shift. She thought about how she had straightened her jacket and walked across the floor. She thought about how there had been a version of herself, maybe years ago, who would have done something else in that moment, made a scene, crumbled, walked out. A version of herself she had grown past, so gradually she hadn't noticed the leaving until tonight. She turned the last light off. She locked the door. She walked out into the spring evening, the city alive and lit and full of sound, the lake somewhere to the south doing what lakes do, holding everything, giving nothing back, just being what it was, which was enough. Simone walked home. She realized, happy. Not the way you're happy in a movie. The quiet kind. The kind that comes from knowing exactly who you are and where you're standing. That kind is the kind that lasts.